Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. I don't know if I'm glitching, but we're going to go with it. This is Battle of Gettysburg, 1863 American Civil War documentary from Kings and Generals Part 2. This is the Union fishhook that I was talking about that I've been to. And yeah, like I said, the Peach Orchard. Been through the Peach Orchard, the Devil's Den. Is that around here? Is the Devil's Den here? And then this is the mountain, right? I don't know. I'm just guessing right now. Let me see if I can get the glitch out of there. Nope, I think I made it worse. All right, we're going to go with this. All right, so before we get started, thumbs up, subscribe, donate to the channel through the thanks button. All options. 2 of them are free.
At dawn on July 2nd, Lee assumed that the Army of the Potomac only occupied Cemetery Ridge, Cemetery Hill, and Culp's Hill. Therefore, an echelon attack up Emmitsburg Road would roll up the unsupported Union flank. Lee ordered Longstreet to lead the attack, with Ewell redeploying from the left to right flank to support him. Hill was incapacitated by illness, and his corps depleted from the first day, so it would remain in reserve. Both generals objected. Ewell didn't want to abandon ground his men had died for, while Longstreet didn't want to attack at all. If he had to attack, then it had to wait. Only elements from 2 of his divisions had arrived, with the trailing brigades due early afternoon. So Lee compromised. Ewell would remain on the Union right, while Longstreet attacked the left once Hood and McLaws' divisions assembled. Across the field, Meade's dawn reconnaissance proved Hancock correct. The corps was deployed on high ground, with interlocking fields of fire, supported by interior lines hidden by the ridge. Wherever Lee attacked, he'd be met by at least 2 corps. If he started breaking through, Meade could rush reinforcements from anywhere to swiftly repel the attack. This deployment was ruined by Daniel Sickles. He resented Meade being promoted instead of himself. Moreover, he was deeply bitter about Hooker ordering him to abandon Hazel Grove during Chancellorsville, and that a peach orchard along the Emmitsburg Road sat on higher ground than he occupied. Determined to not only show up Meade, but prevent another Chancellorsville, he moved the 3rd Corps forward from Cemetery Ridge and Little Round Top without orders, to positions along the Emmitsburg Road around noon. Meade didn't discover this insubordination until Sickles failed to arrive at the afternoon staff meeting. Finding him shortly after 1500, a furious Meade tore into Sickles for having moved into a salient outside artillery support, and committing himself to holding a line too long for a single corps. Worse, it was too late to correct the mistake, as Confederates were spotted preparing to attack. Instead, Meade wheeled off to prepare a relief force. Longstreet was finally ready to attack at 1600 after a long march to hide his movements, but was surprised by Sickles' advanced position. Hood argued for flanking Sickles and taking Little Round Top, but Longstreet said there wasn't time to redeploy before Lee's patience expired. After a 30-minute artillery barrage, Hood's attack began. Hood ordered his men to take the heights. However, he didn't specify which heights before being wounded by artillery fire. Consequently, the attack was uncoordinated. Some regiments began marching for the 3rd Corps' left flank, while others marched for Round Top. The 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters initiated contact from the base of Round Top and a boulder field called Devil's Den, while the Confederates assaulted the entire line. The defenders repelled 2 assaults against both Devil's Den and nearby Rose Wood. However, Confederate numbers let them flank the defenses via Plum Run Valley. The fighting was so fierce that the valley was renamed the Valley of Death, and the field was named Slaughter Pen. However, the pressure was too great for the defenders, who began fleeing north. Meanwhile, a disaster was averted at Little Round Top. Sickles' advance had left only a signal corps post on the hill, whose barren top oversaw the entire battlefield. Meade dispatched Warren to evaluate the situation, and after reaching the summit, he saw the glint of bayonets heading his way. He immediately sent out riders to find troops to hold the hill. Strong Vincent's brigade from the 5th Corps was the first to respond, arriving just as the Confederates gave up chasing the sharpshooters up Round Top and moved to take the more strategic hill. Though exhausted, the Confederates still launched a powerful assault on Vincent's right, which was repulsed. The attack began shifting left as the Confederates looked for the flank held by the 20th Maine.
I believe on the Little Round Top, there's a statue of Warren looking out. I believe it was Warren. So that was right there. So I swear the Devil's Den is right in here, because there is a road nearby. Anyways.
Knowing there was nothing to his left but a few sharpshooters, Colonel Chamberlain first stretched his line, then bent it 90 degrees, holding off multiple attacks from 3 regiments who kept trying to flank him.
Chamberlain, for his part, single-handedly saved the Union from being flanked, and cannot be said enough how important what he did was for the Union in that moment. Just can't be said. It was, I mean, they were to the point where he says fix bayonets because they were out of ammo.
Running out of ammunition, Chamberlain ordered a bayonet charge, his bent left swinging down like a door. The Confederates routed, and many were captured. However, the right flank nearly broke under heavy pressure, and Vincent was mortally wounded. Reinforcements ultimately drove off the rebels around 1800. Across the field, McLaws finally attacked at 1700. Moving in echelon formation, McLaws continued Hood's attack on Rose Wood, finally breaking through the defences and extending to the Peach Orchard. The hard-pressed 3rd Corps fought fanatically, but were overwhelmed and began breaking. Sickles' right leg was shattered by cannon fire and later amputated. However, as the Confederate right broke through Stony Ridge and entered the wheat field, Federal reinforcements arrived. Meade had redeployed to the 5th Corps, along with 1 division from the 2nd Corps and 2 from the 12th Corps, to rescue the 3rd. The counterattack pushed McLaws out of the wheat field. Once his left flank finished breaking the Peach Orchard line after sustaining heavy casualties, McLaws again attacked and retook the wheat field. A flanking assault from Little Round Top pushed him out again as casualties piled up in the Valley of Death. The wheat field would change hands twice more before the Confederates conceded the fight at 2000. Further up the line, Lee added Hill's freshest division to the assault. Anderson's division struck the remaining 3rd Corps division holding the Peach Orchard line, crushing it and ending the 3rd Corps as a fighting unit. Anderson and McLaws continued the assault towards Cemetery Ridge, where gaps had been left after defenders redeployed to the wheat field. Fortunately, the long march left the rebels disorganized and required them to pause at Plum Run, giving Hancock and Meade time to find reinforcements. The first counterattack came from Willard's brigade against McLaws's right, shattering Barksdale's brigade and mortally wounding the general. Wilcox's brigade would have pushed through a gap, but for the 1st Minnesota launching a suicidal bayonet charge, which succeeded in halting Wilcox at the cost of all but 47 of the regiment's men. Several units claimed to make the crest of the hill before being thrown off by counterattacks, and the rebels pulled back by 1900. There is confusion among modern historians about what Ewell was supposed to be doing during Longstreet's assault. Lee later claimed that Ewell was supposed to demonstrate and then attack once he heard Longstreet's cannon fire. Ewell responded that he was only supposed to attack if a suitable opportunity appeared, and never heard Longstreet's guns anyway. Regardless, he had been ineffectively probing and bombarding Union positions on Cemetery and Culp's Hill since 1600. Around 1800, his troops discovered the defences had been weakened to defend the left flank, and Ewell ordered a general attack at 1900. Despite being lightly held, the Federal breastworks were formidable and backed with artillery. The attack on Culp's Hill captured abandoned rifle pits on the slope, but halted as darkness arrived. Early pushed through a gap, making it to the Baltimore Pike on East Cemetery Hill before incoming Federal reinforcements and nightfall forced him to retreat. Fighting on Culp's Hill continued, as some returning units stumbled on the rebels in the dark, while others intentionally launched night attacks. The guns finally fell silent about 22:30. Stuart finally shook his pursuers and rejoined Lee that afternoon. After being thoroughly dressed down for leaving the army blind, he was ordered to support Ewell, who was to bring up more troops and renew the attack on the heights the next day. Longstreet continued arguing to disengage, but Lee wouldn't hear it. Pickett's division had finally arrived, so a full-strength Longstreet was to attack again at dawn, simultaneously with Ewell. Meanwhile, Meade's War Council advised staying put. Their defences had been held, and the 6th Corps' arrival closed any holes remaining after the day's battles. The 12th Corps returned to Culp's Hill to drive off the rebels, and Meade warned the 2nd Corps to dig in, particularly Gibbon's division. Lee had attacked both flanks today, and if he was following Napoleonic doctrine, Gibbon's position at the exact centre would be next. The BMI now had prisoners from every Confederate unit but Pickett's division. Whatever happened next would be led by him. Despite Lee's intentions, Pickett's division wasn't on the battlefield ready to attack when dawn broke. Worse, at dawn, the 12th Corps' artillery opened up in preparation for retaking the hill. The bombardment prompted the Confederates to attack first. Lee tried to cancel the attack to preserve his plan, but Ewell tersely responded, too late to recall. Ewell's attempts to further reinforce the hill were halted by artillery fire from Cemetery Hill, and 3 waves of attacks failed against Union breastworks. Ewell ordered a retreat around 1100. Therefore, Lee changed his plan. The Federals had to be close to breaking after 2 days of hammering from his invincible army. They were pouring reinforcements onto Culp's Hill to drive off Ewell. His subordinates had reported making it to the top of the ridge yesterday. He had George Pickett's fresh, all-Virginian division ready. If he sent a purposeful attack at the depleted center, it would surely shatter, especially if spearheaded by Virginians, led by Longstreet, his warhorse. Lee's plan was characteristically audacious. Longstreet's corps would assemble with Pickett in the lead behind Seminary Ridge, while Stuart moved around the Union right flank. Following a mass artillery barrage, both would charge the Union center, somewhere near where Cemetery Hill became Cemetery Ridge, splitting the army in half. Longstreet was stunned, horrified, and strongly objected. McLaws and Hood's divisions were spent and too far south to get into position to attack. Even if they could, he didn't believe that Lee's plan could be achieved by less than 30,000 troops, and begged Lee to reconsider. Lee was adamant about attacking with Longstreet's 15,000, but agreed not to make McLaws and Hood redeploy. Instead, 2 divisions from Hill's corps were added to the attack force, which Pickett would lead under Longstreet's reluctant command. Stuart was informed of his role in the attack around 1000 and began moving once he was certain Ewell was retreating. At 1100, he crossed Cress's Ridge and signaled Lee by firing 4 cannons. This was a mistake. Union cavalry had been watching for Stuart to attempt a flanking move, and upon hearing the cannons, they moved to investigate. Skirmishers from McIntosh's brigade made first contact, stalling Stuart. A Confederate charge at 1300 scattered the skirmishers after Union artillery knocked out Stuart's guns. As the Confederates rode forward, a cry rang out, "Come on, you Wolverines!" Custer personally led the 7th Michigan to charge Stuart's lead brigade, breaking it after a fierce melee. Stuart prepared another charge, but Custer again roared, "Come on, you Wolverines!" and led the 1st Michigan in a countercharge. Stuart realized that his mission had failed. Even if he could push through, he'd never make it to the Union rear in time. Therefore, he withdrew. Lee intended to supplement Pickett with Hill's least engaged divisions. However, poor communication meant that Heath and Pender's heavily depleted divisions were assigned to the charge, despite the fact that both generals were incapacitated by wounds. It took all morning to assemble the 13,000 men and position every battery in the army for the bombardment. At 1300, the largest artillery barrage of the war began. Between 150 and 170 Confederate guns opened fire on Cemetery Ridge. A similar number of Union guns responded. The bombardment was completely ineffective. Most Confederate guns overshot, damaging Meade's headquarters, supply wagons, and the extensive reserve Meade had prepared, but missing the actual defenders. Union gunners couldn't effectively counter battery due to thick gun smoke and dense trees, but they weren't trying to. It was obvious an attack was coming, and they were saving ammunition to repel it. The Union guns purposefully slowed and then stopped firing one by one, tricking the Confederates into thinking they were silenced. Longstreet tried to get anyone else to order the attack, finally giving in and doing it himself at 1400 as Confederate gunners ran out of ammunition. The Confederates marched deliberately and steadily forward, with Trimble and Pettigrew on the left and
that area here, that's a mile. Just so you know, that is a mile distance uphill on a slow decline. Sorry, I'm glitching. And they're on the high ground. And they just waited. And on a side note, Pickett from Pickett's Charge, buried at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia. I've been to his grave. I stumbled across it, actually. Just a side note.
and Pickett on the right. Anderson's brigades failed to advance for reasons unknown. Federal guns immediately opened up. The three columns were supposed to gradually merge together for a concentrated strike, but the fields concealed uneven ground interspersed with fences, ruining cohesion. Worse, Federal artillery fire tore huge gaps in their lines. Union pickets in the fields opened fire, and then were bewildered as the Confederates marched past them. Orders were to not stop before reaching the ridge, but many soldiers dissented. Thousands hid in depressions in the fields and along the sunken Emmitsburg Road. Union defenders entrenched behind a series of stone walls, as the rebels were at Fredericksburg, and opened fire at 400 yards. As the column advanced and its line narrowed, Federal units advanced off the ridge to fire enfilade volleys. Pettigrew and Trimble faltered and stopped just past Emmitsburg Road. Anderson's brigades finally advanced, but artillery quickly turned them back. However, Pickett's division continued on towards a turn in the stone wall, and Alonzo Cushing's battery. Hancock was wounded as he directed fire on the column, and two of Pickett's brigade commanders fell. However, Lewis Armistead placed his hat atop his sword and led his men to charge the defences along the angle. Several Union regiments withdrew, letting Armistead and 250 men take Cushing's guns. However, additional regiments arrived and poured fire from three sides. No soldier who followed Armistead over the wall returned to Confederate lines. Pickett's charge cost 8,000 Confederate casualties to 1,500 Union, and ended at 1,500 as survivors trickled back to Seminary Ridge. Thousands more would surrender once Union troops found their hiding places. Back on Seminary Ridge, Lee simply hung his head and said, "It's all my fault." He never explained his thinking beyond telling Jefferson Davis not to blame the soldiers for Lee asking too much of them. Pickett was distraught, openly blamed Lee for the disaster, and held the grudge for the rest of his life. His after-action report was so accusatory that Lee had it burned. However, morale remained high, and some units offered to reform and charge again, which Lee morosely refused. As Pickett's charge failed, Kilpatrick decided to diminish the victory. He'd been ordered to patrol the left flank and keep watch on Longstreet's corps. However, Kilpatrick wanted to fight and ordered reckless charges against the fortified infantry, which earned him the nickname Kill Cavalry. By 1700, all the guns fell silent. Battle of Gettysburg was the largest and deadliest battle ever fought in the Western Hemisphere, with over 150,000 men engaging during 3 days of battle. Meade reported 23,049 casualties, about one-fourth of his army. Lee's reports were increasingly terse and vague about casualties from this point onward. Historians agree he'd suffered between 23 to 28,000 casualties, over a third of his army. The North celebrated Meade's heroic victory. News that Vicksburg had fallen added to the euphoria. Over in Europe, Lord Palmerston quietly took recognition off the table. The Confederacy had no chance at outright victory now. Halleck and Lincoln congratulated Meade before ordering him to attack and destroy Lee. However, Meade's army was in worse condition than the casualty reports indicated. It had rapidly marched for a week and then spent 3 days fighting in a sweltering summer heatwave. The water sources that weren't fouled by blood were being drunk dry by the influx of 150,000 soldiers and at least that many animals to a township of 2,500. While no statistics were kept, war diaries and officers' reports suggest that half of each army became heat casualties at some point during the battle. Additionally, it was foolish to move off the heights to attack a still dangerous enemy. All the terrain advantages that won the battle would be reversed, and Meade refused to risk another Fredericksburg. Additionally, a torrential rainstorm arrived. Both armies spent a soggy Independence Day rescuing their wounded and exchanging prisoners. Lee knew his invasion had failed and began preparing to retreat during his nightly war council on July 3rd. Longstreet and Ewell pulled back to Seminary Ridge and built breastworks, anticipating that Meade would attack. When he didn't, Lee began slipping away on the night of July 4th, starting with the thousands of supply wagons taken during the invasion. Meade couldn't move his infantry until he knew what Lee was doing. To that end, the cavalry was dispatched on July 4th to harass Lee and report on his retreat. Pleasanton had some of his divisions skirmish with Stuart while dispatching others to watch the roads south. Kilpatrick partially redeemed himself by recapturing several hundred wagons in Monterey Pass the same day. Lee fully departed Gettysburg before dawn on July 5th, which Meade discovered mid-morning. However, he didn't know where Lee was heading and remained in place until July 7th, when the infantry moved south in 3 columns. Meanwhile, the cavalry continually clashed with Stuart and the Confederate rearguard, capturing thousands of prisoners. Lee was heading for the previously built pontoon bridges at Falling Waters between Hagerstown and Williamsport. However, the bridges were destroyed by high waters, worsened by heavy rains on July 7th, just as the army started arriving. Lee prepared fortifications to hold out until he could cross again. The defenses were finished just hours before Meade's infantry began arriving on July 12th. Seeing the extensive fortifications and still haunted by Fredericksburg, Meade refused to attack without proper artillery preparation. He positioned his army for a July 14th attack when the artillery was ready. Lee was counting on Meade recklessly attacking him, which Halleck and Lincoln were screaming at him to do. Realizing that he was instead preparing to bombard him into surrender, Lee ordered his engineers to get a bridge up now. This was done by nightfall July 13th, with water levels falling enough to ford as well. By morning, Lee was across the Potomac, though Meade continued pursuing him until the inconclusive Battle of Manassas Gap on July 23rd. Lincoln was deeply frustrated, but historians debate whether a more aggressive pursuit would have destroyed Lee or Meade's army.
It would have done more damage, but I don't know if it would have ended. It wouldn't have ended the war. It would have taken... It certainly would have killed a lot of Union. It would have killed Confederates. Lee doesn't surrender. You know? So it would have, I understand, I see both sides. I understand why Lincoln wants it. I also understand why Meade doesn't do it. And the whole time Lee is preparing for it. So, you know, it doesn't end the war. Apologies to Abraham Lincoln. It doesn't end the war.
Both armies spent the rest of summer licking their wounds. Meade would advance again in September, but halted after he had to dispatch troops for the Chattanooga campaign. Lee took the opportunity to launch a turning move on Meade's right flank, but Meade proved too cagey for Lee's trap. Instead, the two fought a war of maneuver while failing to bring each other to battle at an advantage. While Meade successfully pushed Lee behind the Rapidan, he was forced to retreat to winter quarters in December, following a failed river crossing to await the arrival of a new general-in-chief. This brings an end to the deadliest military engagement that ever took place on American soil. In our next episode on the American Civil War, we will part from the land war and take a brief interlude to discuss the naval theatre. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting.
Okay, well, we're going to end this here. That was the, Gettysburg. If you ever get a chance to visit, I'm sorry, I'm glitching. I wish I could. I can't really do a whole lot to fix it. It somehow just gets worse. I don't know. It just gets worse if it's not 100%. If you get a chance to visit Gettysburg, do it. It's I only visited the Union Fishhook, did not go into the cemetery. I went to the museum. There's a cyclorama. Is it cyclorama? Is that what it's called? I think so. What is that sound? It's probably your house. It's not mine. Yeah, you're hearing it, not me. It's at your house. You need to fix that, whatever it is. The cyclorama, if you get a chance to do it, it's a 360-degree painting, and it displays the whole battle as it happens. And there's like sound and there's smoke. It's awesome. That's a separate ticket. I think it's like $10. Maybe it's 20. I don't remember. But you can stay up there and see it as many times as you want. That one was awesome. I should have done it a second time. The gift shop's expensive, but the battlefield itself is really cool. I don't mean that it's awesome to witness where people died. I don't mean it that way. You understand. But there's so little of it that I saw. I just saw the Union fish hook as opposed to the whole battlefield, because there's some north of, I say north, but on the map, north of Gettysburg on both sides. It's massive. And in Gettysburg, which I didn't go into Gettysburg. So there's a lot more to see, and I need to go back there. So I'm going to end it here. So until next time, have a good day, have a good night.